The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on this one-click rendering webinar to show you a little bit of using SketchUp and Enscape alongside each other. Firstly, I hope the weather is as nice where you are as it is where I am here. Sun is shining, wonderful blue skies. Unfortunately, we can't get out and about to enjoy it, I guess. But first and foremost, I hope you are all staying safe and that you're well. Thank you very much for taking some time out of your busy schedules and no doubt manic workflows from your working from home, so on and so forth, to join us today. What I want to do is really take you through a workflow of using Enscape with SketchUp for the next half hour, 45 minutes or so, and just show you the kind of results that you can get very, very easily. Before we start, I'm not a fan of death by PowerPoint, so I've literally just got a couple of things that will just help you more than anything as we go through the webinar. So you are all on mute because of the number of people that we have in the session, so you won't be able to physically ask a question through your microphones. However, whether you are logged in via the web or via the thick client, the downloaded client, you have the ability to ask a question using the panel on your right of your screen. Any questions you should have throughout the session, ask them in there, and then when we get to the end, I will go through them one by one and answer them as best I can. And secondly, this session is being recorded. So we're recording the session and it will go up onto our social media channels in due course afterwards. So once again, good morning. My name is Robin. I'm one of the technical guys leading the team at ElmTech in the UK. And for those of you that don't know ElmTech in the UK, we are the UK distribution partner for SketchUp. And alongside those seats and subscriptions of SketchUp that we are pushing out to our resellers in the UK, we also deal with a number of high-end third-party plugins such as Enscape, which we're talking about today, which really enable you to drive a better workflow, in this case to produce far easier one-click renders. So I'm literally going to jump straight in to SketchUp rather than going through slide after slide on PowerPoint. I want to spend as much of this session as we can physically inside of the product. So I'm running SketchUp Pro 2020. And I've got the latest version of Enscape installed on there, which I downloaded and installed latest version this morning. So this is all up to date as of 9 o'clock this morning. And really, the main thing you'll notice if you're a SketchUp user is I've got a load of extra bells and whistles on my toolbar at the top that you wouldn't normally see. And the first thing I really want to try and explain to you is how easy this tool is to use as a designer. So I've simply opened up the kind of scene that SketchUp put together for the hero images for the 2020 release. So it's a nice little scene. It's nothing overly complicated, but we've got a nice little design here on some topo with some trees and some water at the bottom. And literally the first thing I want to do is kind of just explain what's going on with this and really try and get you to understand the process of what Enscape does for you, because okay, great, I get a nice looking scene inside of SketchUp and it looks really good, but what if I want to visualize it in a more realistic manner? Perhaps I don't have the individual skills to maybe go out and focus on something like V-Ray or another rendering package to give me ultra high-end photorealistic renders, but I want to be able to get something out that is very high quality. I want to get something out that looks realistic, but I want to do that quickly and easily without adding additional time onto my workflows. So what Enscape does is it literally takes what you have inside of SketchUp and it renders it for you. So without doing anything else first, I'm just going to literally come up and start Enscape. So I've pressed one button. Now, what Enscape will do is it will look at the component geometry that I have inside of SketchUp. It will look at any materials that I have assigned inside of SketchUp, and it will start working with them. And the key here is everything that you are about to see is a default SketchUp material. So let me just go into full screen inside of Enscape, and let's just hide that user interface at the bottom of the screen there. So instantly I get something that looks a little bit better. Those trees that looked quite meshy and blobby before have turned into 3D rendered trees. But the key here is, whilst I have something that's very refined and very nice, I actually have a live environment. So what I have inside of Enscape is something that I can physically look around, fly around, and see what's going on. So I can literally start moving around my model. I'm just using the arrow keys on my keyboard, and I can fly around to any location within inside this model to see exactly what's going on. For those of you with eagle eyes, you'll notice that the water is animating. You'll notice that the grass is not a flat texture, it's actually a 3D rendered surface. So if I just get a little bit closer here, you'll notice all of the individual blades of grass. And actually, you get a very, very good image directly out of Enscape. And I haven't done anything special at all to get to that point. I have literally got a SketchUp model with SketchUp materials, and I've pressed the start button. Okay. The only thing Enscapey in here at the moment that isn't in this model out of the box, to be completely transparent, is these trees. I've just placed Enscape assets, which we'll come on to a little bit later. So if I just minimize this here and just really try and drive that point home, if I come and just take a look at this grass, many of you that have been using SketchUp will recognize this grass as the default grass that you get inside of SketchUp. If I come to my materials and just go ahead and grab my sample from here, you'll notice that it's just the dark green grass that is being driven directly from SketchUp. If I go and have a look on my landscaping here, it's just literally from this pack of textures that I have. And what Enscape does is it recognizes it and it changes it to the 3D fully rendered, fully fledged grass. The same with the water. So this water over here, if I go and grab a sample from the water, it's just grabbing the deep water. And again, that is just a standard SketchUp deep water environment or material, sorry, that it's been added. This deck here just has the standard cherry wood. So what Enscape does is it really tries its best to give you a real-time rendered output of that particular scene, model, texture, so on and so forth. You'll notice that if I just leave it there for a little bit longer, it refines the image. So it will do things like removing some of the noise, and it will get you a nice refined image. The longer you leave it, it's basically ray tracing in the background, the better quality image that you get. But obviously you can walk around real time as well, which is great. So first and foremost, you've got this live rendering environment, and that in itself, for a designer, is absolutely fantastic because it gives you the ability to play with things. It gives you the ability to see how your designs are going to come together and what your decisions look like in reality. For example, the first thing I want to do really to kind of further cement this home is I'm just going to take a look at this corner. I'm not particularly happy at the way it's just sort of being propped up by these rocks here, and maybe I just want to add a column in there inside of SketchUp just to attach this to the floor or just show that we've got a bit of a structural design going on. To do that, I'm just going to split my screen. It works better over two individual screens, but as I can't share both my screens through this webinar session, I'm just going to go up and find that same position inside of SketchUp. So I'm looking at the same thing. And the first thing really to point in to view here is we're not in a separate environment. You know, this Enscape window is live linked to what we have inside of SketchUp. So literally anything that I do within the SketchUp environment, be it drawing some geometry, be it let's just do some perpendicular lines on here and just close off that face. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab push pull and just grab that surface and just pull it down. I'll be quite lazy and just pull it through the floor. But you'll notice that I haven't had to tell Enscape to go and update. I've not had to tell Enscape that I'm making a change inside of Revit. You know, that instantly comes across and is taken directly into account inside of my Enscape model. And the same goes for any material changes. So again, I'm going to use a default material inside of Enscape. I'm going to go across to my, let's just maybe choose a concrete for this. And inside of SketchUp, I'm just going to say, let's go and grab a, what should we have? A polished concrete would be fine, a little bit unrealistic. But I'm just going to attach a polished concrete in SketchUp to that column. And you'll notice that already inside of Enscape, I have a slightly different texture on there. It's a little bit shiny, but you get the idea. What we have inside of here is a direct link into the model. We're not having to do lots of different updates. We're not having to do lots of different commands to get that to re-render, to get it to synchronize. It's doing everything that I want it to do for me, which, as a designer, that's great. I can make a change. I can change the paint. I can change a finish face. I can move some landscaping around, add some windows, remove some windows, and everything will be updated live inside of this rendered environment, which is great. So yes, it is a rendering package. It allows you to create these very nice images and very nice aesthetical images. But for me, it's a designer's tool. It's there to aid the designer, make decisions, make conscious decisions based on the visual results, but also go in and give those visual results at a very good quality as well. So let's dive into it in a little bit more detail. So I'm just going to full screen SketchUp just to save my eyes from straining. And I'm just going to show you that what we have here is really embedded into the SketchUp interface. So the workflows that you are all used to doing day in, day out inside of SketchUp kind of exist within Enscape, if I'm honest. Yes, we've got a few things that might be a little bit different if you're not used to rendering, but the same kind of workflows exist because so far I've done everything with SketchUp assets and materials. So, if you work in the way that you are currently working, you will have no issues and you will get very nice results. But what if I want to tweak those results? What if I want to start playing around with different outputs? Now, I'm just going to drag SketchUp onto my second screen, and I'm just going to open up my visual settings for Enscape and just get them over here so that I can see Enscape alongside these visual settings here. So with these particular settings, what I have the ability to do is start changing the way in which SketchUp looks, or which Enscape looks. So with these settings, it might be that I want to see those, raw native sketchy lines or outlines. So I could say that I want to start bringing those outlines across into the model. And you'll notice that my edges start appearing as they would natively inside of SketchUp. So should you like that sketchy lines look and feel and that traditional SketchUp flavor of a model, we can absolutely bring those outlines in and make them very weighted to make it a bit more cartoony if you like to have them really thick, or we can minimize them to have a subtle effect or completely turn them off. It is completely up to you on how you want that to look, but it is controllable just by sliding a slider bar. Very easy to do. It might be that you want to remove all the textures and view this as a white model. I really like this one because it just removes any questions about textures or finishes and allows you to see the model in a kind of almost like a paper model. So this is really nice if you're looking at larger designs or maybe a number of buildings next to each other. You can just get a really good idea of that paper model and what it looks like without textures coming into effect. So it really does allow you to do some nice visual things within inside of the model. The next thing we can do with our settings is we also have a polystyrene type model, very similar. It just changes the level of reflectance and the level of clarity of those surfaces. So on white, you notice you've got more shadows going on. If you put it on in polystyrene, it's a little bit whiter, maybe a little bit more reflective. We've also got light view, which is really interesting. So if I put it on light view, this will actually give me an appreciation of lux levels. It's not doing anything simulation-wise here, but what it is doing is it's looking at the light that's coming in from my environment and looking at what objects it's bouncing on and how it's getting into the room. And it's given me an idea of where in the model has very high light levels and where in the model has perhaps very low light levels. And it really allows us to come in and start playing around with our designs and seeing if there are any areas that we need to add artificial lights. And again, artificial lights are something that we will come on to in a little bit more detail later on. But it's really useful to be able to see that real time and be able to chop and change it as we go through. We've also got lots of options with regards to the atmospherics of our model and how we want this thing to look. So firstly, I'm currently running this off a Dell Precision mobile workstation, a few years old, but it's got a pretty decent graphics card in still for today's standard. It's running off a P4000, I think, a Quadro P4000, so it's a pretty good spec. Because of that, I've got the ability to run this on ultra quality. Now, if you didn't have such a high machine, you might want to turn that down to a medium quality, so it runs a little bit quicker when you're navigating around. But that still doesn't take away from the image. You'll just notice that it takes a little bit longer to refine, and it's maybe not quite as crisp when you're walking around. But it still looks, pretty good. You're still getting all the atmospherics, including the clouds in the sky, so on and so forth. So, depending on your machine, you can chop and change and tweak this to suit. You also have some camera angles and some camera information, which again is kind of personal preference to how you want that scene set up. We can play around with your exposure settings. We can change from perspective to orthographic. We have the ability to then look at that model, in orthographics if we want to see what's going on. So if you wanted to actually render it as a site render, we can come in and choose an orthographic render. We can also choose 2-point architectural perspective, which is pretty much what you'd want for any still render out there. And 2-point architectural perspective will just make it look a little bit more pleasing. So it'll just take 2 points from an architectural perspective. I'll just put it back to the default for now. We can change depth of field. Again, all of these are with a slider. So, anything like compositing in Photoshop that you normally have to do afterwards to sort of add those background or foreground blurs, we have the ability to go in and do that directly inside of Enscape. And whilst it's done, we can then still move around as well. So, we've really got the ability to come in and get the exact image that we want to inside of this system. Now, before we get too far into the actual atmospherics in here, I just want to show you that there are other things that you can do inside of the Enscape renderer. So far, I've literally just been walking around and I've changed a couple of options. But what you'll notice is if I just have a look towards my building here, just keep your eye on the sky. If I hold down Shift and use my right mouse button, if I press H, by the way, it shows me all the controls down here. But if I just hold down Shift and use my right mouse button, you'll notice that one of the other things that I can do, which is really neat, is change the time of day. Now, not only is that cool because it's animating not just the clouds in the sky, but also their shadows and reflections in the glass and on the floor, we can also change this into nighttime, which again is pretty cool because we've got stars and shooting stars and aeroplanes and contrails being highlighted for us in the sky. But it also means if I did have any lights in and around this particular model, it would update and we would start seeing those lights coming on and coming off, so on and so forth. So we really do have an application here that has been really well put together. It runs absolutely fantastically, as you can see on my system here. It just works the way that you would expect it to work. So I just wanted to show that feature actually before we jumped into the atmospherics. We do have some image options. These are very personal preference with regards to how high you want the contrasts or the color saturation. So if you wanted to make this look like a warm image, we could play around with the color temperatures and the ambient brightnesses to make this feel either very warm or very cold. We can play around with motion blur and vignettes and things like that. But for today, I'm kind of going to leave them as they are because I'm not that fussed about changing them. But if I go into atmospherics or atmosphere, what I do want to do is show you that I can start doing some really high-end stuff, like just bringing in a HDRI, for example, using a skybox, which will just give me a background. At the moment, I've got nothing beyond my model. So if I say, okay, well, I don't want to use a white ground. These are all out of the box, by the way. So we have a forest out of the box. We have some mountains, so on and so forth. But you've actually got the ability to download these from several sources, some free, some paid for. If I choose Skybox, I can choose to load a HDRI. I've just got one here that I downloaded for free this morning. This is a 4K one, which is quite remarkable getting it for free. So it takes a little minute to load. But actually, the kind of results and the quality change that you get in your render from these are quite remarkable. Now, you'll notice I now have two suns. It's almost like I'm on a Star Wars planet somewhere. But that's because we've got the sun from the skybox, and also we have the Enscape sun, which is moving through the sky. Because I've got this quality HDRI, I'm actually going to say, put the sun on the sun. So now all of my shadows and all of my lighting are being driven directly from that skybox, which is great. We could rotate this around if we want to, but actually I quite like the fact that we're looking out onto that water. Bar the color change, we'll just imagine there's a massive drop off there or something for the color of the water. And finally, you've got some capturing options. So we can come in and we can choose, do we want to record video in full HD? Do we want to go up to 4K, so on and so forth? Again, really personal preference, doesn't matter for the purpose of what we're doing today. But instantly, the second you start playing around with some of these, like adding the HDRI, apart from the kind of sharp line I've got there at the end of the water that I've modeled, this is really starting to come together now. And again, I've not really done much to this in order to start getting a result. So what I'm going to do is just come down to this this decking that I've got here, and just having a look at this material. It looks okay. It's a default SketchUp material for cherry wood, but what I want to do is make that look nicer. Although it's clear, it's crisp, I do think I could get something that maybe looks a little bit more realistic. And Enscape gives you the ability to download textures or create your own textures using Photoshop, and start to get you a more realistic looking render, but without any difficulty. So it's very, very user friendly and it's very straightforward. For example, if I just get SketchUp back over here, one of the options that we have inside of Enscape in SketchUp is we have this button here, which is Enscape Materials. If I go into Enscape Materials, it will list all of my SketchUp materials, but give me different options. For example, if I scroll in this list, I'll be able to find Wood Cherry Original. And that is the cherry wood that I added from the default SketchUp material library over here. So I could select that and I can see my default cherry wood texture that's been generated via SketchUp, and that's in there. That's great. But I want it more realistic. So what I've done is I've gone onto the internet and I've downloaded some wood materials amongst a few others. So I'm going to say that I want to take out that texture and I want to add in a new texture map. We'll just use this old planks of wood and I'll pick this diffuse. If I pick the diffuse color, it will tell SketchUp and Enscape to deliver that material with this as the diffuse output. I can say that I want to use a bump map, and for the purpose of this, I will use a normal map. That's, without getting too technical, if you imagine you have an image, you invert the colors and play around with the contrast and the brightness until you get something that looks almost like a normalized version of the image, an upside down version of the image, if you like. That's exactly what a normal map is. But from that colored information, SketchUp and Enscape will be able to identify where higher layers are, or higher areas, where lower areas are, and it will give you the roughness. We also have the ability to play around with that roughness. Is it very rough, not so rough? I'm going to leave it around 90 for the purpose of this. Play around with textures, self-illumination, so on and so forth. We can also come in and start tweaking individual textures if we wanted to, making them lighter or darker, making the normal map, any other particular textures. But just by changing that there, I've literally gone in and just said use that and that, full stop. the end, nothing else. And what that will do, if I just go and find that bridge now inside of SketchUp, is it's not really changed the look and feel inside of my modeling environment in SketchUp. But if I fire over into Enscape, typically it's not changed in there. The joy of live demos. Just give me a second. I obviously picked the wrong material. So it's called Wood Cherry Original and not Wood Cherry Original 1. So that's typical. So let's just go back in and just do the same thing again. It's so straightforward, it's not a problem at all. So let's just do a search for the word cherry, grab the original, and then we can come in here and just add those high quality textures. So add the diffuse map, and then add the normal map for the bump. Any other options, close that down, and then we should my Enscape seems to not want to change those materials for me, so I'll carry on. I won't dawdle too much on that point, and I'll figure out why that is in a second. But for some reason it's not updating those textures for that particular component. Strange. Okay, it's all set, so it might just update in a minute. It might be taking a little minute to update. So we can change textures, and we can get those textures more more detailed, more specific, and give them a lot more realism to them. And that spans across. So if we come up and have a look around our model, I'm just going to go into fly mode here, so I'm not constrained to the floor. You know, this looks fine at the moment, but it's all very wishy-washy. It's quite light and quite white. And what I want to do is put a more realistic tile effect maybe on this lower deck at least, so we've got something that's going on, and maybe on this wall here. And again, that can all be done directly inside of SketchUp. So I can come and make sure I hold down the right button, come over to this wall here. And I can come and start seeing what material is attached to this wall. Now, I did this a little bit Blue Peter style. I did create a material on here earlier, which I just need to remind myself of the name, which is called Stairs Wall. I'm just going to go and grab that material, go and find it. And then again, that material is just a default material. It's not water, it's not grass, it's not foliage. So I'm going to come in and just add a texture. Once again, I'm going to use one that I've already got. I've got some nice sandstone that I downloaded earlier, so let's grab a nice sandstone block with a bump map that uses this bump. Again, play around with any other settings that you might want to. You'll notice that Enscape updates SketchUp, and it also updates inside of Enscape. And if you just come and take a look at those textures, you know, they're really nice, high quality textures. You've got the ability to put the bump on there, so you really get that definition of having that mortar joint there, and it really brings something into your model. And you can play around with it then. So if I jump back into the settings for that particular material, I can play around with the bump, and I can give it more bump or less bump. So if I put that bump right up to 10, for example, quite high, but in here you'll notice that this really now looks that it's not a smooth surface. And for rendering and getting a nice quality, that's key, that you have things that don't just look flat. You know, the last thing you want is a texture that just looks completely flat or completely seamless. So we have the ability to come through and really quickly start making these changes to our model, just on the fly, as we would normally. I just have one additional step, which is going into that Enscape material and defining a little bit more information other than what you would normally have inside of the actual SketchUp material. So let's go ahead and create another one, just to take you start to finish. I'm just going to grab a brand new material down here. That just comes up with the SketchUp create material. I'm just going to call this tile floor. Doesn't matter on the color at all. For the purpose of this, I'm just going to leave it absolutely blank. And then that tile floor, I can literally just attach that with my paint bucket and attach it onto this this surface here. and then into my Enscape materials, I can go in and find the word tile, find tile floor, and again add my texture. I've got a tile that I set in here somewhere, marble floor, there we go. There's the diffuse color. We can either use a bump or a normal map, depending on what we have available to us. So I don't have a bump particularly for that one, so I'll just use the normal. Give it a couple of seconds to load. I could go around and play with scaling and things like that if I wanted to. So at the moment this is quite small. I might want larger tiles, so I could come in there if I wanted to and start playing around with that texture and give it, bigger scales, give it a different rotation. Again, for the purpose of today, I'm not going to. But doing things like that, you really can see that it does make a huge difference to the kind of quality of the model when you start getting those bump maps and normal maps on there. It starts to look really, really nice. The next thing we can do inside of Enscape is start working with assets. So one of the things I said first of all is the only thing that I kind of started in this scene that wasn't native SketchUp was the trees and a couple of the rocks down here on this island and by the pontoon at the bottom there. So we have a series of assets inside of Enscape that we can use. Think of it a little bit like the 3D warehouse, but with render quality assets that are low mesh as well. So these trees, for example, they're very low polygon count, very low face count, but in the renderer they look fantastic. And they also, when you're moving around, they'll sway and move around and things like that as well. So I'm just going to replace this default SketchUp component here, and I'm going to go across into my asset library inside of SketchUp using Enscape, and I'm just going to place a couple of assets. Now we have a number. There's 1,500 in total. Varying from different accessories to vehicles, street props, vegetation. I'm just going to use a couple for the purpose of today, just to show you this process of placing them. So I'm going to go to people, and I'm just going to wait for a few of these to load, and maybe pick one. There was a lady standing there, so maybe we'll do the same thing again. We'll just add this person. Again, it snaps to faces, so just like you would in SketchUp, we can come in and just place that person wherever we want them placed on our outside area. I'm happy with that, just as a single person there. I'm quite a lazy person, so I don't like the long walk down to my boat down there, so maybe we'll add a vehicle. The vehicles on here are probably not the most relevant for traveling cross-road, so I think I'm just going to go and place an electronic scooter there for this lady to use on the deck just there. And it looks like a nice day, so we better go and add a piece of furniture so that she can have a seat and enjoy her view from her balcony. So we'll just let that load. And while this is loading, you can just see that we have a number of these different assets. And when we jump back into the renderer in a second, you'll really appreciate the kind of speed that we added it, but the quality that brings. And again, the more of detail like that you can add into your render, the better quality and the more realistic it will look. So I'm just going to come and pick one that isn't there anymore. That's frustrating. That'll do. It's more of an inside armchair, but for the purpose of this, I don't really mind. We'll just place that one down. Once we're done with that, we can just use space as we would inside of SketchUp to cancel the command. Jump straight into our render, and already we have those components in there. But as you can see, the quality of those components, there's some great stuff on the 3D warehouse, absolutely fantastic models that people put a lot of time in. But these are specific render quality assets. Not that we'd have a chair like that sat outside, but it's a really good quality asset that brings a lot to your render. And these people as well, they're very high res characters, but they are very low faces and very low polygons. So you can imagine if we go around and set all of our model to have those kind of assets in, it would look absolutely fantastic. And there's not that much additional work for you to do. The other thing I really like about those assets is the ability to really bring your model to life. So a couple of things on that, for example, is this area here. We've got quite an area of foliage around us. We've got different trees and things like that. It might be that we wanted to show a render that is in the autumn or whatever it might be, and we want to show the fact that there are leaves on the floor or anything. So I can come in and choose a number of different assets from characters, from people, but also foliage as well, ground cover, and things that again are just potentially, apart from the fact that I've got a few floating there, potentially going to really build the quality of our render. And just raise it to the next level, things that we otherwise would not have been able to do. And actually out there in the Enscape community, we've got people that are using the water material on top of a surface to make it look like it's rained, using the grass material but with different values to make it look like piled carpet. There's a lot of options in there to give you a really nice look and feel, and really build on those outputs and renders. So what else can we show you today? So let's just come into this kitchen area. I'm just going to have a look at this counter. So at the moment, I don't have any lights in this model, and that's no fault of the model itself. It's just that we don't typically add lights and add light values inside of SketchUp out of the box. But again, using Enscape, we have the ability to very quickly and very easily place different types of lights in and around the model. And to do that, I'm just going to throw maybe just a rectangular downlight on here just to show the speed and the ease. So as well as placing assets and as well as placing materials, we can also place Enscape objects. Now these objects are predominantly lights, but you also have sound sources as well. The sound source I won't show you because you won't be able to hear what I can hear through my speakers. But the sound source will literally give you an MP3 file or a WAV file that you can choose and play, so that when you come near it inside of the renderer, that noise of a crowd of people or birds singing or waves lapping onto the beach, that noise would play. So again, these are all things that are starting to build to the quality of our render. For the purpose of this, I'm just going to place a simple light. So I've got a few options from sphere to spotlights through to disk. And I'm just going to say that I want to have some square downlighters on the underside of here that are pointing down towards my my kitchen worktop here. So choose rectangle, and then essentially we're at home, right? We're drawing inside of SketchUp. We should all know how to do this. There's a couple of if, buts, and maybes. So we're clicking to place the fact that we want a rectangular light there. And then it's going to give us the ability to choose what sort of height we want that. So I'm just going to scroll downwards and click. And then again, it's giving the ability to choose where we want that light pointing to. Okay, so we can click anywhere. So I'm just going to say that I want a light pointing from there down onto my my worktop there. And I'm just going to make that really, really bright. We can come in and have specific values for sizes. So let's say that I want to have that 0.1 in width by 0.1 in length. And then I'm going to add a disc-shaped one as well, just next to it. But this one I will leave connected to the surface, pointing down at the worktop just there. This one's a little bit big, so let's just drop it right down again. We'll set the value to 0.10. And again, we'll whack the luminous power right up. So basically, we've just drawn two components. This one's a bit badly placed, apologies for that. I've done that quite rushed. But both of them we can select and we can see the source and where they're going to. And we have grips to move them. The standard move and rotate commands would work. But the key here is those lights or those objects will now be shown as lights inside of Enscape. So inside of my model, I'm just going to go and turn off that skybox. If you remember, I said that I linked the skybox to the light. So for the purpose of this, I'm going to turn that off just to really show those lights how they need to be. And I'm going to make it nighttime. So let's just drop this to 2 o'clock in the morning. And we can see that those lights are very bright. They are very bright because I made them very bright. But again, if I come back in here, go into my my objects, if I choose an object in here, that object can be chopped and changed. So I can make something lighter, I can make something darker, and all of those, after a few seconds, will get updated directly into our model. Okay, So we can go in and we can really bring this to our own, and we can really start adding a load of different lights in here to start making this model look exactly how we want it to look at any time of day. And again, we can control when they're on, when they're off, but Enscape knows that the lights come on in the nighttime and they go off in the daytime. They will also work with those lux levels, so on and so forth. So you're really getting something that is intelligent. It's giving you a really good output really, really quickly. So let's just jump back. I'm just going to delete those. I don't need them in there for the purpose of what we're going to go through for the last little section here. But I will turn that skybox back on, mainly because I like it, because it makes me feel like I'm on the beach when I'm actually sat in my home office, which is very small and compact, but needs must in these difficult times. So let's turn that back on and let's jump back in. So great. Hopefully you're getting the appreciation that this is very easy to use. We're getting results that look really, really nice. But what else can it do? Can it do anything else? Well, the answer quite simply is yes. So firstly, it can be customized. So when you first load Enscape, it has like a loading screen. It has an icon and a logo and a title up here. It has an icon and a logo down here on the taskbar. Can it be customized? Yes. So you can have a custom loading screen to make it specific to your company or your client, including interface overlays, which might give you watermarks, so on and so forth. So it can be customized. We also have the ability to work with different inputs, so changing the speeds and the control of things, working with 3D screens if you have one. The ability to come in and start working with different devices is really quite cool. On top of that, it also has full VR support, so all of the VR headsets that you would expect, the Rift, the Vive, Windows mixed reality, plug and play with Enscape. Once they're working in Windows, you press that button, single click, and Enscape will be working inside of your VR headset. You don't have to do anything special. So fantastic functionality in there. The other things that you have inside of Enscape, let's press H. We have some more options. So you've seen me walking around and going faster and going slower. You can bring up a little mini map, which is showing us where we are in the model, which is quite nice. We can see what we're looking at and where we're walking around, which is quite nice. We can also change the time of day. You've seen that. What I really like is the video editor. And this is cool because anyone that's ever done any kind of manual rendering in a very high quality photorealistic piece of software. The video outputs are fantastic for driving your designs and driving your product, but they're quite time consuming. And if you want something out quickly, this is the tool for you, because I can get to a camera that I'm happy with and I can say, add a keyframe. I can then just use those real-time tools inside of Enscape and add a keyframe, maybe go up a little bit on this one towards this tree, add a keyframe, straight up to make sure we don't go through the tree. I'm literally just moving around my model, and as I move around, clicking that add keyframe button, and you'll notice that that timeline there is just getting bigger and bigger, and the duration is getting longer and longer as I go through adding different things into my model. And all I'm doing is, this isn't doing anything to Enscape. It's not going to throw the size of your SketchUp. It's not going to throw the size of your SketchUp model through the roof. But what it is doing is it's giving us the ability to drive a video directly from what we're doing on the screen and then play that back. So I'm just going to end up in the corner of this room looking down these stairs. So that's done. First and foremost, we get a really cool 3D spline where that camera is going. What's great about that is all of these cameras here that you can see are all of those points where I added a keyframe. Each one of those can be selected, it will jump to that, and we can change settings. So I can change the field of view at that point in time. I can change the time of day in that point in time, so on and so forth. So we've got endless customization there. And once we've done that, once we've got to the part where we're happy with that keyframe, I can preview it. And literally this will go through and it will animate a fly through, a walk through, whatever it might be around your model. And to get something that quickly that looks that good with very little input, again, the point I made earlier, this is a designer's tool. I don't have to be trained specifically in a rendering piece of software to get these outputs. You know, anyone that is able to drive SketchUp and produce good quality models in SketchUp will be very quick to pick this up and start producing outputs. It just works. It works really well. It is a pleasure to use, and it's easy. It really is as easy as it looks. And this is customizable. This video, I could go in and make it longer, make it shorter. But essentially, it's just pulled all those points together, and it shows you that smooth animation throughout that video. Now, whilst that's continuing to play, this video, once it's previewed itself, absolutely you have the ability to save that video out. So we have some output options here. So we can choose to take that and, if you like, traditionally render that out, which will just save that file as a video file on your hard drive. The difference is it's not rendering everything as a still frame. It's basically just going to pull it from this. So the quality that you see is kind of the quality that you'll get. You're just going to go ahead and choose the output settings. So I'm not going to render it whilst on here because it will take a few minutes to output it. But if I come up and show you that I've got the ability to render that video, I go ahead and choose my format, choose my path, and hit render. And that will go away and it will render out that video. It will take a few minutes, but it will be a few minutes rather than a few hours, and you'll get the quality that you've just seen inside of SketchUp as a shareable video, which is fantastic. The other thing that you can do is render still images. So still images, great. It is very good to be able to do those still images, obviously. So I can get to an image like that, and I can say, happy with that, I'd like to render a still image. We can choose to use any specific scenes we have saved inside of SketchUp. So if you've got some scenes set up, we could use those. I'm just going to say, use my Enscape view. The key there is this button at the top. We could set this off with a load of scenes in SketchUp, and then basically tell Enscape to go and fire all those out overnight or during a lunch break. I'm just going to use one, save that into my desktop. Let's have this folder here and just hit save. And this will literally take seconds. So this will go in and it will essentially sit there and iterate. The quality is already there, so all it's got to do is save that as an uncompressed file, if you like. So you've got a nice high quality output. But if I go and find that and open that image just here in Windows Editor, you'll see the quality is great. You know, we have a really good high quality render which we can put on our website, marketing materials, social media, whatever it might be. But again, it's just a still image. The great thing for me about Enscape is the fact that I can fly around, I can move around. So why not use that in more detail? So to put that into perspective, the last kind of thing that I want to share with you today is these two buttons here. So this is exporting a standalone executable, and this is exporting a web standalone executable. And I'm going to try and press both of those and fit those in the next 2 minutes before I open up to some questions. So firstly, export web standalone. What this will do is it will prepare the model and upload that model onto the internet, onto a secure server, where I could then share that link with individuals to go and view that in Enscape on the web. Depending on your internet connection, it might take a few seconds, it might take a few minutes, but it's literally dependent on your internet connection. But literally that will give you a license-free ability to view that model through the web. Now, it's not going to look quite as crisp and quite as rendered as what you've seen today on my workstation, because it's through a web browser, right? We need to take that into account, but it is going to be better than looking at a still image because you've got something that you can walk around, fly around, and interrogate. The second option, the executable option, is by far the one that I like the most. And the reason being is I can actually produce from here a license-free, self-running application of this model running through Enscape that is license-free. So I could take this model and I could put that executable on Dropbox or put it on a USB and send it to someone, and they could run that on their laptop or on their workstation, so long as it's a half decent spec, and they would get the exact same functionality that you've just seen in a viewing mode without a license of Enscape required. So they'd be walking around your SketchUp model inside of Enscape to the same quality that you've just seen, but they wouldn't need a license. And for me, that really drives home this kind of real-time renderer, the ability to really help that collaboration piece and help us be able to push this out to a wider audience of people. So this has taken a little bit longer than I thought, but it's probably because I'm using all my bandwidth by doing this broadcast in the first place. So I will cancel that, but after the session, I'll run that back up, and maybe we'll stick that link out there somewhere for you to see. But again, these are great. They work really well, whether you're exporting a standalone executable or whether you're exporting to web. It allows you to render out still images. It allows you to save those animations, or you can just share these real-time environments for someone else to walk around in their own time, with or without VR. And really, a little bit longer than the 45 minutes that I thought it was going to be. But really, that kind of gives you everything that I was hoping to talk about from creating these outputs and these renders inside of SketchUp using Enscape. So they're real time. It's very easy to do. You can get very good results without much input, and it really brings those designs to life. So I am going to open up for some questions, but I really hope that was useful. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. For those of you that aren't staying for the questions session at the end, thank you for joining us. Stay safe, and we hope to catch you next time. For those of you that are, and for those of you that have a question, then please use your GoToWebinar panel on the right. There's a Q&A section. Just type the question in there, and I'm just going to go through and start answering some of those questions now. So a question from Ivan. Good afternoon, Ivan. Can you create a rendered 360 pictures for VR headsets? Absolutely, Ivan. Good question. So inside of Enscape, you may have noticed these two buttons up here in SketchUp. So we have the ability to render a panorama, which will just give you a 360 image as a still, and we also have the ability to render for something like Google Cardboard or web-based Cardboard. So I should just be able to give you a quick overview of that now. It shouldn't take long on this machine. But if I just jump onto this deck, maybe look out like that, and then in here say that I want to create I won't do the cardboard one because I can't demonstrate that obviously through the web. But if I just do a panorama and hit render, what this will do is you'll notice it will go through and do the several different renders it needs to create that 360. So it will render around the bottom 360, it will render around the middle 360, and it will render around the top 360. And it will take a little bit of time to do that because it's got to stitch them together and be quite specific by matching the quality. But that will produce a 3D image, if you like, that you could then see with a Google Cardboard or something like that. So short answer, absolutely. Yes, you can. Who else have we got a question from? We have another question from Ivan about subscription only or perpetual licenses. So I'm pretty sure it is subscription only, Ivan. I am the technical guy, so I try and keep my technical hat on and my sales hat somewhere else altogether. So I would suggest that if you do have a sales related query, if you ping an email to sales@elmtech.co.uk, they'll be able to point in the right direction of one of our partners that can explain a little bit more about the pricing and the sales side for this. So a question from Mark. Good afternoon, Mark. Can you edit Enscape asset materials? Ooh, that's a very good question, Mark. Let me have a little look while that render's running in the background. So those assets are a little bit different, if you like, to what you would get from the warehouse. So if it's something from the 3D warehouse, it's just a SketchUp asset, so you can do whatever you want with it to a certain degree. Whereas these assets, as you can see, you really don't get the full picture of what's going on. Now, This is going to be a bit slow because of what I'm doing with the HDRI in the background, which is nearly finished. But I don't think it's going to give you the full level of editing the materials against that asset. It's kind of preset. I will double check when this HDR is finished, which is just on its last pass now. But with that, you can select it. It will select it as a SketchUp object, and you could get through to the point where you are looking at the materials, but I don't think it's going to let you go that far. Let's wait for this render to finish. While that's going, I'll just have a look through some of the other questions. There we go. So that render's finished. So just to go back to my panorama. So Ivan, your original question, there's my pano. If I save that to a file and then go and open that, you have a pano, and that would be a 360 VR pano, if you like, on a mobile. With regards to the question on assets, I'm pretty sure the answer is going to be no. Yeah, so you can't go in and edit those materials, unfortunately, on the assets. But if you download an asset from the 3D warehouse, then obviously it's just a SketchUp component, and yes, you can. Some questions from Himmel. Is the software free to use? There is a free trial for 14 days, so by all means go and download that trial and get some renders out, but it is a paid for piece of software. And the second question from Himmel, is it available for both PC and Apple versions? I'm pretty sure it's only PC, unfortunately. I've certainly only ever used it for PC, so if you're using Apple, you would need to make use of Parallels or Bootcamp. Brad had the same question as James on Mark, as editing the Enscape assets. Again, unfortunately, you can't edit the assets themselves; they're kind of fixed. With regards to the materials, yes, absolutely. With regards to the lights, you can go ahead and place tints on things, so you could get a tint, a lux color, so on and so forth. The water and the grass, to a certain degree, yes. There are a few different types of water. Again, I can kind of explain that with the SketchUp water. So at the moment, that water is set, I think, to just deep water. If SketchUp will play ball. If I can get to that level. Typically, after praising my laptop, it looks like it might be giving up the ghost. So essentially, you have a few different levels of water. There is shallow water, deep water, something that looks like a pool, something that looks like a lake. And it's all to do with the name of the material that you have. So if you call it deep water, it will make it look like deep water. If you just called it water, it would look like a typical water, clear water, so on and so forth. So it pretty much uses these different material names to give you the different types of depth. But if you play around with the color, it will allow you to start playing around with how colorful that water is, so on and so forth. Other questions that we have. Ping my questions back out. I think my colleague Kyle is also going in and answering some of the questions on the chat panel as well, so thank you for that, Kyle. Other questions, have we got any more? Can you create your own 3D library? So absolutely you can. You wouldn't be able to save those in the assets. So those assets that you have here, they're all purely downloaded from the internet. You wouldn't be able to add into here. They're Enscape assets driven and created by Enscape. But absolutely, if you just create anything inside of SketchUp, just use your component libraries as you would normally, and then place Enscape materials on there, and hey presto, you've got something that will work as an Enscape asset. So short answer, yes, you can. Last couple of questions then before we wrap up. Hardware requirements. So it really depends on the quality and the size of the models. So Enscape does benefit from a decent graphics card. Again, I'm running a Quadro P4000 in this laptop, so it's pretty high spec, although it's quite an old card. It's quite high spec, so typically we advise that people are either running a Quadro or a decent GeForce to give them very good outputs. If you want to work with real-time ray tracing, the RTX cards work really well, but it's kind of a person-by-person question and depends on the kind of models that you're producing and the size of them. So again, I think for that, Zara, if you contact sales@elmtech.co.uk with the machine that you have at the moment, the spec, the kind of models that you're putting together and what you're after, we can kind of advise on whether that's enough, whether you might benefit from a RAM upgrade or a graphics card upgrade, and we can put those recommendations in place for you. Good. Okay, so I think that's taken us to the end of the questions. Obviously, if you do have any further questions, then don't hesitate to get in touch. Sales@elmtech.co.uk, and we'll be more than happy to answer any follow-up questions you have. Once again, the session has been recorded, so expect to see it on our social media channels for you to rewatch should you want to. But thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe, and until next time, catch you later.